One of the things that stood out is CIA's involvement in mainstream media and Hollywood. And I think a lot of people have suspected that over the years. You see a lot of comments and a lot of discussions about that, but this makes it even more real because there's very specific examples of how they do that, how they approach, what the conversations are like, why they do it. And like we said, this is just scratching the surface. This goes very deep.
During the time much of the world was shut down during COVID.
Breaking news, just COVID-19. A brand new coronavirus. A new normal.
Dr. Matthew Alford was at his home in the UK when he received a strange delivery to his door.
I think it was literally in lockdown. I was doing nothing in my life, as you can imagine, and I got a letter through the door, and it was from the CIA, and I thought, this is bizarre.
Dr. Alford is an author and lecturer of the University of Bath, who specializes in studying the relationship between the entertainment industry and the U.S. military. After opening the envelope, Dr. Alford found himself reading the personal emails of one of the most famous figures in Hollywood.
Oh, why have I got a letter from the CIA? And why am I reading all of Ben Affleck's emails?
Then he remembered, 8 years prior to receiving the letter, he'd filed a Freedom of Information Act request, seeking to find out if the CIA had secretly worked on the 2012 film Argo. In the movie, which was also directed by Ben Affleck, Affleck plays a real-life CIA operative named Tony Mendez. In 1979, Mendez was part of an elaborate plot to evacuate 6 U.S. diplomats from Iran.
It's on you to protect yourself. That's why we trust and personally use Aura, today's sponsor. Aura does all the heavy lifting to keep you safe online. They take action against these data brokers and companies who are selling your personal information. Going after them directly, you don't have to lift a finger. Aura handles it. But that's not all. Here's where it gets even more serious. Aura doesn't just stop there. They continuously monitor the dark web for any trace of your personal data. If they find your information floating around in places it shouldn't be, Aura will alert you immediately. They'll let you know fast if anyone is trying to use that data to access your credit accounts or even drain bank accounts. And if the worst happens to you, Aura has you covered. They offer up to $5 million in identity theft insurance to help you recover if someone gets a hold of your information and tries to do real damage. Don't wait until it's too late. Head over to our link, aura.com/anonymous, to try Aura free for 14 days. That's plenty of time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed and start protecting you from these threats.
After the United States Embassy in Tehran was taken over by Iranian Islamists, though 66 members of the embassy staff were taken hostage, 6 managed to evade capture and escape to the homes of the Canadian embassy officers. The CIA needed to figure out a way to get them out of the country while they hid with the Canadian embassy staff. Mendez's plan involved infiltrating the country by posing as Hollywood producers who wanted to film a big-budget movie in Iran.
I got an idea.
They're a Canadian film crew for a science fiction movie.
I fly into Tehran. We all fly out together as a film crew.
I need you to help me make a fake movie.
So you want to come to Hollywood and act like a big shot without actually doing anything?
Yeah.
You'll fit right in.
Though the film was a hit and won an Academy Award for Best Picture, some critics were quick to point out the liberties Affleck seemed to take with the story of what actually happened. Many critics noted how the Hollywood film version seemed to inflate the role the CIA played in the rescue. The Canadian magazine Maclean's wrote, "The movie rewrites history at Canada's expense, making Hollywood and the CIA the saga's heroic saviors, while Canadian Ambassador Ken Taylor is demoted to a kindly concierge." In response to the criticism, In later versions of the film, Affleck would change the on-screen postscript text to read,
The involvement of the CIA complemented efforts of the Canadian Embassy to free the 6 held in Tehran. To this day, the story stands as an enduring model of international cooperation between governments.
And now a brief message from our sponsors.
Selling to the Department of War is hard, especially if you don't know who to talk to, where the real buyers sit, or how to find funding. That's where SBIR advisors come in. They help you find the right buyers, find the money, and write winning proposals so you can get on the right contract fast. Their team of veterans are dedicated to getting great tech into the hands of our warfighters, and they've helped small businesses like yours win millions. If you're serious about selling to the military, go to SBIRadvisors.com, and if you mention PSYOP, you'll get your first month free.
And now, back to our program.
What Dr. Alford wanted to know is if the CIA itself was involved in Affleck's artistic liberties with the story. Dr. Alford is the author of the book National Security Cinema, the shocking new evidence of government control in Hollywood, and co-produced the documentary Theaters of War. He and his fellow researchers frequently submit Freedom of Information Act requests to learn about the CIA and the military's efforts to influence the movies and TV shows Americans watch. As it turned out, the CIA was very involved in supporting Argo.
And of course, it was that I'd put in a Freedom of Information Act request in 2012 that had taken over 8 years to come through. No one knew that there'd only been actual contact between CIA and producers for that show until this information came through. So there are several of these shows that actually, whether they intended to cover it up or not, basically the information didn't come out that they'd been working on those, that they'd been working closely with the producers.
And, in many cases, the changes that the CIA and military branches were making to major blockbusters and TV shows weren't just minor tweaks to characters for accuracy. What Dr. Alford and his colleagues have uncovered is that in many cases, the military directly oversees key elements of mainstream entertainment. Dr. Alford uncovered that Affleck even visited the CIA headquarters to meet with key figures there in the lead up to the movie. However, documents Dr. Alford reviewed show that permission to film at the Langley campus was only given after several script reviews by the CIA. Emails between officials at CIA called the film a, quote, good news CIA story. In an interview with The Guardian leading up to the movie, Affleck acknowledged the primary similarity between what his job as a Hollywood director is and what the CIA does: deception.
One of the themes of Argo is about storytelling and how powerful it is, from political theater to the way we kind of communicate to our children to the way that we inspire people, and it's interesting that Hollywood and the clandestine services are both spend most of their time convincing people that something that's not true is in fact true.
He also added this half-joking observation.
I think probably Hollywood is full of CIA agents, and we just don't know it. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to discover that, this was extremely common.
But Affleck was already familiar with what it was like to work with the agency when he collaborated with them on Argo. He'd previously worked with them on the Jack Ryan film, The Sum of All Fears. His former wife, Jennifer Gardner, starred in the TV show Alias, where she played a super spy. The series was supported by the CIA, who worked closely with producers on it. Garner would even be featured in a recruitment video for future spies.
I'm Jennifer Garner. I play a CIA officer on the ABC TV series Alias. In the real world, the CIA serves as our country's first line of defense in the ongoing war against international terrorism. If you're an American citizen and seek a challenging, rewarding career where you can make a difference in the world and here at home, contact the agency.
But what Matthew Alford and his colleagues have discovered is the connections go deeper than most in the public can imagine.
The US military has worked with Hollywood producers for about 110 years or so.
As Dr. Alford explains, the military has long seen value in being able to affect how they are portrayed on screen.
And indeed, even the very first film that was ever made, pretty much the first political film, was literally the Spanish flag coming down and the American flag going up in 1898 in a little black and white 10-second movie. But really, the relationship became much stronger between the military and the Department of Defense in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, when there was the establishment of the Entertainment Liaison Office in the Pentagon, and when all this architecture of national security really came into being in the mid-late 1940s.
World War II was sort of a golden age of government propaganda and military psyops. Starting in 1942, the military was looking for ways to get messages behind enemy lines. In many cases, PSYOP methods like dropping leaflets were too dangerous in access control areas. However, they saw an opportunity in one of America's popular new trends, scanning the radio dial.
If sudden pain ever hits, in your head or nerves, there's an easy way to make it fade.
One of the surest ways to feel your best is the simple pleasure of being smartly dressed.
At the heart of the American tradition lies an economic system built on opportunity and initiative.
Particularly popular were shortwave radios. Unlike stations found on the FM and AM dials, shortwave signals weren't subjected to the same kinds of regulations that control major broadcast frequencies. Unlike AM and FM signals, shortwave radio signals bounce off the ionosphere and can be transmitted around the globe, even by amateur radio operators. That means that if you have a shortwave radio transmitter strong enough, you can broadcast your message anywhere on Earth, even behind enemy lines. Shortwave broadcasts soon began sending news about the war all over the world.
World News Today, brought to you by Continental Radio and Television Corporation, by shortwave broadcasts direct from important overseas capitals, as well as the leading news centers of our own country. CBS correspondents are waiting to bring you a complete report from the world's political and battlefronts.
FDR saw an opportunity to send pro-Allied messages into enemy-controlled countries and create the Office of War Information. Part of their job was to operate the shortwave broadcast of a new outlet called Voice of America. Listeners located anywhere on Earth could hear the news of the world, often from a perspective advantageous to American interests. These type of broadcasts remained an important part of American psychological operations throughout the Cold War with the Soviet Union.
The crucial element of his stay in China will, of course, be his talks with Chinese leaders.
The idea of using media as a method of influence had long interested the intelligence agencies, with the CIA identifying movies specifically as powerful instruments of warfare in a 1943 memo titled "The Motion Picture as a Weapon of Psychological Warfare." The stated objective of the formally classified document is to, quote, exploit the potentialities of the motion picture as a weapon of psychological warfare for the United States. Here's an excerpt from the memo.
The motion picture is one of the most powerful propaganda weapons at the disposal of the United States. It can serve many diversified functions. Motion pictures are a potent force in attitude formation, and attitudes are the basis of action and morale. Motion pictures can stimulate or inhibit action. Motion pictures are important in all the major types of psychological warfare, directly in general propaganda, indirectly in connection with certain aspects of subversive, economic, and diplomatic propaganda activities. Motion pictures can be employed on most of the major psychological fronts. They can be aimed at the people of countries allied to the United States, of the countries occupied by the United States or her allies, or countries neutral to the United States, to inform and to create attitudes favorable to the United States and unfavorable to the enemy.
The memo also discusses the, quote, Suppression of motion pictures of enemy origin judged to have potentially subversive influence, and makes note of the military national security strength of having an influential U.S. motion picture industry, the products of which have achieved a worldwide popularity. Domestically, even the White House began to support movies, not just news outlets like it was doing overseas through Voice of America broadcast, which drummed up support for its geopolitical agenda.
In the late 1960s, John Wayne wrote a letter to President Johnson to say, I want to make a propaganda film about Vietnam because I believe in this conflict. Lyndon Johnson said, fine, you have whatever you want to do that. They made the film Green Berets.
The film was not received well by critics.
If you've ever seen it, it literally ends with John Wayne with his arm around a little Vietnamese kid walking off into the sunset with him saying, hey, this you little lad, this is what it's all about, fighting for democracy and like walking off into the sunset.
The film is not subtle about its thoughts about the Vietnam War, like in this scene in which soldiers answer questions from reporters critical of America's involvement.
Let me put it in terms we all can understand. If this same thing happened here in the United States, every mayor in every city would be murdered. Every teacher that you ever known would be tortured and killed. Every professor you ever heard of, every governor, every senator, every member of the House of Representatives and their combined families, all would be tortured and killed, and the like number kidnapped. But in spite of this, there's always some little fella out there willing to stand up and take the place of those who've been decimated. They need us, Miss Sutton, and they want us.
The CIA, however, took a more behind-the-scenes approach to using movies for its own geopolitical purposes. Their involvement in Hollywood remains clandestine and, in most cases, unofficial. A series of letters were found in the Eisenhower Presidential Library that would later show correspondence between an executive at Paramount Pictures in 1953 named Luigi Loroschi and a CIA officer only known as Owen. That demonstrated just how linked the agency was with major studios. Some of the discussions in the letters revolved around how characters should be presented to favor perceptions about American dignity, particularly in their interactions with foreigners in films. Some projects were killed off entirely for geopolitical purposes, like this one called Gringo. Loroschi's letter reads,
a comedy vehicle for Bob Hope involving Mexico, bandits, etc. Very funny but very offensive south of the border idea has been killed, done by a U.S. company with a U.S. comedian. It would be most injurious to our Latin American interests.
Another letter notes this creative change the studio made to a character in a film Paramount was developing.
We have planted the background for the female lead, so wherever the story goes, at least this will have a chance of remaining as an integral part. The girl is now no longer an American girl of dubious virtue, but a nice foreign girl. Whatever she did in her past was because she was on the run after the commies took over the country, which until then had been a very nice place to live in. Not quite as blunt and corny as this, but in essence, this will be the idea.
Loroschi also provides the CIA officer insights into which studio executives the agency could rely on to perpetuate their messages, and which ones, quote, will have to be guided very carefully. Despite being active behind the scenes within the Hollywood studio system, the CIA strategy was to remain in the shadows, and it did not have any sort of formal office to deal within the entertainment industry. For the most part, they didn't even want to be formally acknowledged in the films. The less people knew about them and their real role in Hollywood, the better. They only wanted any sort of acknowledgement as an organization if it meant helping the institution to survive.
Even though the CIA didn't have a proper office, a proper outfit, they were still able to prevent even the mention of the acronym CIA from its inception until 1959. And the first film that even shows CI is, I think, North by Northwest by Alfred Hitchcock, and Hitchcock removes the A. So, although historians have popularly seen the CIA as not involved in Hollywood, it actually did a heck of a lot in the 40s and 50s behind closed doors. The main historian on this particular thing, the person who wrote the first major book about this, he said that if it weren't for the 3 films that the CIA helped to produce in 1947, probably the CIA itself wouldn't have even existed, because that laid the astroturf, that laid the media landscape for people to accept the creation of this new national security body.
Though interactions behind the scenes with the studios were common with intelligence agencies, the military took a different approach. They would make their relationship with Hollywood more direct by propping up what is known as the Entertainment Liaison Office at the Department of Defense.
The relationship became much stronger between the military and the Department of Defense in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, when there was the establishment of the Entertainment Liaison Office in the Pentagon, and when all this architecture of national security really came into being in the mid-late 1940s.
For decades, though, the work of these special DoD offices remained mostly under the radar.
My identity must remain a secret.
Dr. Alfred Tomsecker and others got curious about just how involved officials within this office were in the creation of Hollywood projects, and started sending out Freedom of Information Act requests about the office's work. Eventually, they learned the truth. In some cases, like the one involving envelopes of Affleck's emails, it would take years to get any response to the requests. But once they started to finally get them in, they made some surprising revelations.
Until recently, the past decade or so, when I was first looking into this in the early 21st century, I accepted the consensus opinion from just a very tiny handful of people who were vaguely working on it, that there were perhaps a couple of hundred films that had been affected over that sort of 100 years of Hollywood by the Department of Defense or the US military. That was very inaccurate. It was also misleading. We were being deliberately misled by the historians involved and by the Department of Defense. In fact, there have been several thousand products by now which have been impacted by the Department of Defense, as well as various other arms of the national security apparatus, including the CIA, Homeland Security, FBI, and so on.